Hello, everyone, and welcome to All Things Relative, Finding Your Family at the Library. Thank you all for joining us today, and we have a very interesting topic. And we will, some things for Zoom. I'd ask everyone to please mute yourself just to help limit distractions during the presentation. And see some very familiar faces. So we'll have some time for question and answering at the very end. Though if any questions do arise during Kathy's presentation, please feel free to put them into the chat and I will read them out loud at the very end. And at this time, I will turn it over to you, Kathy.
Great, thank you, Sean. Okay, so today we're gonna hit the road and we're gonna plan a family history road trip. This is a picture of me in Ontario when we took, it's interesting, I'm just hearing an echo downstairs, but that's okay. Oh, carry on. I am taking pictures of a tombstone that was one of my Loyalist ancestors when I was on the Loyalist Trail, finding information about my Loyalist ancestors. The thing about taking a trip is that you really feel like you connect with your ancestors. It's almost like they're calling to you. And this is a picture of me and my brother standing on the land of Anders Petter Andersen, who is our great-grandfather, Swedish grandfather. He and his wife, Fredrika, immigrated from Sweden in 1880. And because of the 160 acres they were able to get from the Homestead Act in 1862, something that Lincoln promoted, they were able to get free 160 acres with the guarantee that if they actually built on it and lived there, it would be their land. So Bill and I and my sister-in-law and my husband made the trip to see what it was like where they lived. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So let's talk about why genealogy and why a road trip. For me, it's almost a spiritual experience. We visit the places where our ancestors lived, we connect with them, and we connect with the flow of life. And it's about connecting with those who have gone before us. I've found that I just delight in standing on the land or in the house where our ancestors lived and loved and laughed and cried and perhaps even died. I mentioned that when we talked about every home has a story, those of you that were with me on that topic. And when we're standing there, we rejoice in their successes and we grieve for their losses. It really, for me, is really a spiritual experience. I think too that knowing about our ancestors helps us develop our own sense of identity because their example empowers us to delight in their triumphs and to accept our own challenges, to delight in our own triumphs and accept our own challenges. We become a part of our ancestors' story, and their story in turn becomes part of our story. So let's backtrack a bit and let's get into some of the nuts and bolts. I'm going to be talking about travel. And so a lot of the things I'm going to share are things that you might already think about when you take a trip, but we're going to have a little genealogy twist on our travel this time. So let's talk about how we put the story of our ancestors together and how actually visiting the places helps us with that story. And we're going to talk about how we begin to plan. So I'm going to give you some tips, and I hope those of you that are thinking about this can apply this to a family, a road trip, but also a trip that might be not so family related. Okay, so one of the first things, and we probably all know this, is who are you going to accompany? Who's going to accompany you? And what's the purpose of your trip? Well, who's accompanying you is really important on a genealogy road trip because if they're not interested, that could be a disaster. So think about that and think about why you're taking this trip and what you want to achieve. So who's accompanying you? Well, you may be a fellow serious researcher and an obsessive genealogist. And I have a library friend that I've traveled with and gone to libraries. We have absolutely no problem being in a library the entire day. I have a dear cousin who I've traveled with to Roots Tech in Salt Lake City. No problem being in the library the whole day. So if that's something that you want to do, you want to go to museums and libraries, make sure you have somebody who's on the same wavelength as you. My brother and sister-in-law were very kind to accommodate me in many areas, but we also did things that they wanted to do. So think about that as you plan your trip. Think about a family member, a good friend who sympathizes with your obsession. Well, my husband is really a dear, and he's a photographer, so he's happy wherever he is if he can take pictures. And my brother and sister-in-law were wonderful on our trip to North Dakota and Wisconsin. But think about a person, a good friend, family member who you love dearly, just may not sympathize with your obsession. So probably they're not the person to take on this trip. Now, my daughter and I took a cruise, a genealogy cruise, which was really fun. And it was perfect because I did the genealogy part and she had so many things to do on board the ship that she was perfectly happy too. And then we would just come together for dinner and for other things that were going on, the tours and all. So sometimes a genealogy research group is a really good way to go because you're going to meet a lot of other people who may be obsessed as well. So figure out what your purpose is. What is it? Why are you doing this? Is it because you really want to do serious research and you do want to be in a library a good portion of the time? Do you just want to visit the places like maybe the house or the land or the church? Just check them out and you know they were connected to your family and you want to take a few pictures. That's good too. That's a great way to go. Maybe you just want to see the ancestors in the context of their time and location. That is, you just want to get a feel for what their life was like. And a perfect way to do that are places like Williamsburg, Plymouth, Upper Canada Village, which is in Ontario, is a great place, 1880s Canadian lifestyle, place where they've created a village and they have teaching and people in costumes and carrying on the crafts. That really is a great place to get a feel for the time and the location. Maybe you also want to see some of the other historical sites. When we were in the North Dakota, Wisconsin area, we were in the area, well, we were in an area of a lot of historical things. And so we did take that in as we were touring. And maybe you just want to drive through town, get an idea of the architecture, see what's there, and move on to something else. And that's not good too. So decide what your purpose is. But I'm going to throw in another one that's a little different. Maybe you want to meet the cousins that you have met online, that you've been communicating with, either through your DNA or through online sites, because that's become such an important part of putting the picture together of your ancestors. So preparation. Okay, so my advice is that you do all the preliminary research you can ahead of time so you're not doing it on the road, because you want to be doing fun things on the road. So develop the story as much as you can using online resources before you go. And contact all those places that you might want to visit, because the worst thing is arriving and seeing the doors are closed. They're not going to be open till next week or whatever. Make your arrangements ahead of time. So libraries' hours change, museums, cemeteries, churches, historical societies. Get all your ducks lined up before you take off on your trip. And create your itinerary just as you would with any travel plans. And contact the cousins that you hope to meet. Now, you know, it's probably not a good idea to arrive in town and say, you know, call up and, hey, I'm here, you know, and you haven't ever met them. You've just been communicating. Connect with them before and tell them that you will be in town and you'd love to meet them for lunch or just a coffee, and then let it go from there. But give them a little heads up time. And I've found that I've just had wonderful experiences with the cousins. But since you don't know them really, it's probably a good idea to make a contact before you take off on your trip. Make appointments for the different places you're going to, as you know, churches are often closed. So if you do want to visit a church, you're really going to have to make an appointment for that. And then get a binder or folder or get your smartphone, all your things lined up just as you would a trip. I would make duplicates of original documents. Don't take those with you. And I've found Evernote to be great on a trip. I've talked about this in some of the other sessions we've been together. It's a clipping tool that has, you can keep all your notes and it's right on your phone. So that's something you might want to look into. Okay. Also, another suggestion I have, these are all the kind of to-dos as you get started, is to create a correspondence log. I found that if I did write someone or I did talk to someone on the phone, I want to remember that name, because when I show up at the museum, the historical museum, I want to ask for whoever it is that I talked to who said they would find materials for me or would give me a tour or whatever. So I keep a running list of all the correspondence or the phone calls I've made of to people as I prepare for the trip. Lisa Louise Cook, for those of you that are looking for a good podcaster or a blogger, or a YouTube channel person, Lisa Louise Cook is a great way to be on top of what's happening in genealogy. I just think a lot of her, and I've mentioned her before. So that's someone just to remember down the road. Okay, so now while you're pulling this together, you not only want your direct line, your great-grandparents, your grandparents, your parents, you want the collateral family. And that's the aunts and uncles, the siblings and the cousins, because they have just as much information as you have about the great-grandparents. They may have more. They may have lived closer. They may have inherited the photos, the diaries. So this is a collateral family. And as you're researching to get ready to go on your trip, be aware of the surnames that the daughters married into, because when you go to the graveyard, those surnames are going to be popping up all around the tombs that are the gravestones that you're looking for. So if you know those names, I know with my brother, I took a family tree chart as we were going through the cemetery in North Dakota. And Bill would say, well, now who's this? And I had the family tree right there. I said, well, this is, the third cousin, da-da-da-da, because they'll all be buried together in this community. So it's good if you just prepare yourself for those names. So this is an example of my husband's family tree. These are his great-grandparents circled in red up at the top. And this is his line on the left. But these are all other lines in his family. And when we were in New Zealand a couple of years ago, this is a New Zealand Australian family. These other New Zealand Australian people had fabulous photos. One had a diary. They had fabulous things. And so these collateral cousins are really important as you do your research. They also can answer some questions about the great-grandparents as well. So collateral people, you want to keep track of them. And when you go on your field trip, keep track of your cluster people. Okay, what's cluster? That's the fan club. And those are the people that travel with your relatives. They're the friends, the associates, and the neighbors, the fan club. Elizabeth Schoen Mills refers to this as her fan club. She's a well-known genealogist. So keep a list of those names, because they too will pop up in the cemetery. They'll pop up in the church lists. They'll be on school lists. They're witnesses to legal documents, and they help you track where your family is. They're the people that came over on the ship as they immigrated and went to the same town in the Midwest. This is the fan club. Let me give you an example of this. This is a reminder to look at documents twice and go back. This is my maternal great-grandparents, and I've talked about them before. These are the ones who came to California in 1868. And those of you who have been with me for the last few months may remember they came down the coast, the East Coast, crossed at the isthmus on a small gauge railroad, and then took a steam ship up to San Francisco. So this is probably their wedding or picture, or shortly after. She may be pregnant in this picture. But I was looking at their wedding certificate, and the first time around, I was interested in their ages. There was an 8-year difference in where they were born and where they were married. But a couple of years later, I went back and looked at this after I had done more research, and I saw that the witnesses were Arthur and Maddie Snow. And all kinds of bells went off, because Arthur and Maddie Snow, after 2 more years of research, were Arthur was in a law firm with Daniel Monroe. And when I went looking for information on Arthur, I realized they had been classmates at the University of Michigan and had graduated in about 1867. And I don't know if Arthur went on to Albany Law School or not with Daniel, but he was a lawyer, and they formed a law firm in San Francisco. So that was really an important piece of information. This is cluster research. So you'll see this on ship immigration rosters on ships. You'll see people who then appear in the town where your family settles. This is the cluster group. So keep an eye on that. And that will come in handy as well. This is a directory. We've talked about city directories, and you can see here on the left is Daniel Monroe living on Washington Street. We've talked about that in the past. And then we've got A.H. Snow in the Exchange Building. So they followed each other to San Francisco. This is another example of cluster research, although this is also kind of a shirt-tail relative. Enoch Larson, now stick with me on this. Enoch Larson was the brother of the second husband of the daughter of the brother of Frederica, my great-grandmother. Okay, you think, whoa, why is this important? It's important because Enoch Larson had land next to my great-grandfather, and all of his pallbearers were friends and associates of my great-grandfather, Anders Petter Anderson. So Enoch Larson helped to solve a problem, which I'm going to share with you a little bit later. This clipping was amazing information. Okay, so that's just some background as you start to prepare and get ready and get your things together for the trip. Okay, now if you're going to really do serious research, figure out what you want to find out, where you want to find it out, and what types of records will provide that information. Is it going to be a land deed? Is it going to be a church record? Is it going to be a birth record? And then think about where these records are. So this is if you're getting serious about this. And we know we've talked about all the types of records that help us bring color and texture to the lives of our ancestors. The vital records, the court reports, records, church records, military records, cemetery, immigration, newspapers, and local and general history. Those are all the kinds of records that help us develop this story. So where are they? Well, they're online. So if they're online, exhaust all your online. Don't waste your time on your trip on online. Get that done before. They're going to be in libraries and archives. Remember, we've talked about how, maybe at most 30% of documents are online. The rest are still actually in the repository. So we can actually write and call and get help, but they're not online in the big four: Ancestry, Find My Past, My Heritage, and Family Search. They're going to be in courthouses. They're going to be in churches. They're going to be in cemeteries, and they're going to be in historical and genealogical societies. So those are the ones that we want to connect with. Okay, so this is Anders Petter Anderson, and this is Fredrika Johansdotter. And these are my great-grandparents who came from Sweden. They're on my father's side. They're on his father's side. And they left Sweden in 1880 to come to North Dakota. So as I was trying to pull together all the information I knew about him, I went to Family Search, and I really want to recommend, I've been recommending Family Search over the last few months, but one thing that Family Search has that nobody else has is the Research Wiki. And it's like Wikipedia. It's a collaborative database where people have added their knowledge, and we all benefit from this. Family Search is free. You can sign up. It's every bit as good as Ancestry. It's a great place to start. But the Research Wiki is really great when you're traveling. And let me show you how this works. Just you go up to search and you scroll down, and it's Research Wiki. Notice also books. They have digitized books so that you don't have to take them out of the library or find them someplace. This is a great site. Okay, this is what it looks like, the Family Search Research Wiki. And you can put in a subject, a topic, or a place. I used it mostly for places, but you could put in Quakers or Presbyterians or other kinds of things, but it's great for a place. So I want to find out, when I was preparing for my trip to Sweden, I wanted to find out more about the town of Finnerudja, which is the town of Anders Petter Andersen and Fredrika Johansdotter. So I wanted to find out how I could find these different records that I wanted to just know about them. So I put Finnerudja in that little box. And there, lo and behold, there was a web page on Finnerudja, this little town, which must not have more than 300 people in it, a parish town. And they had some ideas of places I could go. So you can see here, general records, church records, military records. You can click on any of these and then they'll give you some suggestions. You can see census records. Now, one of the big things in Swedish genealogy are the household examination records, which were part of the church. And they're saying that that's a good place to go to find where your people live, to find where they were baptized, married, etc. Here they give the big four down here. Archive Digital is the big Swedish database, which is a subscription. And if you're really into Sweden, then that is something that it probably is a good thing to subscribe to. So they give you all kinds of ideas, but the coup de grace is that they actually had the place names of some of the farms where Anders Petter and Fredrika lived. And I was just delighted to see that. These are all farms. In Sweden, you don't have an address if you live in the country. Here's Finnerudja up here. You actually get your mail by the name of your farm. And the garbage cans don't have an address on them. They have the name of the farm. So anyway, that was really great. But one step further were the genealogical societies in Narki, Sweden. Now, I thought, well, I'm going to check this out. And I saw that Askersons and Finnerudja had genealogy societies. So I emailed these people. I explained what I was doing, that I was going to come to Sweden. I did not know anybody over there, but I would love to connect with cousins because I knew there were older siblings. And could they help me? Well, lo and behold, they found these wonderful people. These are the cousins, the children of the older sister of my great-grandmother, Fredrika. And the Genealogy Society is the one who linked me up with them. So be sure, as if you're anywhere in the United States or wherever you're going, because the Wiki is for international, look up the town where your people are, see if there's a genealogy society, and see if they'll help you find cousins. And in fact, these 3 genealogists were with us for 5 days as we explored all the different farms. Anders Petter was a tenant farmer, so he moved from farm to farm as he could get a job. So every year he was practically moving to a different place. He did not move to America until he was around 40. And then he came and got land, and his life definitely changed. But the older sisters were still left in Sweden, and these are their children. So libraries. Okay, so definitely check out the Wiki. That is a key thing to help you. Libraries. Okay, so these are the little libraries. This is California History Room, which I've been talking about, which is upstairs, and many of you have used it and know about it. The one on the upper left is the New England Historic Genealogical Society, a wonderful place if you have colonial ancestors. But this one on the bottom is really special. This is in Aldistown in Ontario. And when we were on the trail, the Loyalist Trail, checking out information about our Loyalist ancestors, I saw that there was a heritage collection in this Aldistown, Adolphustown. And I wrote to them and they said, well, we're actually closed and we'll be closed on that day. We're closing for the winter. This was in October. But we do have a volunteer who has offered to come and open it up for you and help you find information on your people. So we arrived on a Sunday, and this lovely volunteer met us and was with us all afternoon and you could see I was just in heaven with a stack of books there. While we went through and were able to use all this information. Now, this wouldn't have happened if I just arrived and knocked on the door, because I was, I knew that there were some serious things that I wanted to find, and I made arrangements before, and I was so grateful. And as a result, just a reminder on this one, small historical societies do help us. It's really nice to make a donation of some kind because they have a tight budget. So I was really grateful for that. That was a real highlight of our trip. So again, in review, these are all of the things that can be in libraries: census, directories, newspapers, obituaries, maps, photos, a clipping file, and secondary courses. And these things are not online necessarily. They're not in the big four. So what you need to do is find everything that's online and then look for the things that are not online. And that's on your trip. So as far as libraries, these are the steps that I take. I look at the town where I'm going and I look to see if there's a public library. And I look at their website and I see if they have anything that might interest me in the catalog, because they may not. And if they don't, I have other things to do. I check the hours and the days that the library's open, because library hours are different everywhere else. And I may even contact them and see if I do need to make an appointment. I have made appointments with librarians and archivists because they can pull things out before I'm there. And it really saves them time and saves me time and gives them a time to sort of think about what might be helpful to me. Also, another factor is some libraries don't have enough room for all their materials, so they store them off-site. So they may be in the catalog, but it may take a day or so for these books to come over. That's certainly the case in big universities, libraries. And so if you are really intent on getting a certain book that you think you can only get there, you need to give them a little heads up that you're coming. Look and see if there's finding aids. Those are the things that describe collections. In the California History Room, we have the finding aids on the different collections we have. And see if there are some restrictions, and do you have to work with a certain person in order to have access to these materials. Also, while you're looking, you're not only looking for places, you're looking for surnames and historical events in their catalog. There may be some books or there may be periodicals that have the surnames of your family. Again, we're going back to that collateral, because it's not just the direct line. You've got your daughters marrying into other families too. So make a list of all of these things that look interesting. Don't waste your time going through the catalog at that library. Do it before you get there. Have it on a piece of paper, the 5 books that you want to look at. But don't spend your time in the catalog there. You could be doing other things. Also, if you do, I found that sometimes I'll find these books now look great, and I'll say, well, I'll just check and see if they have been digitized. So I go to some of the places where books are online: Google Books, Internet Archive, Hathi Trust, Family Search, Heritage Quest, to see if they're online. Because if they're online, I can read them at home. I don't need to do that in the library or even go to the library. So just see if you see some great titles on that local catalog, then check that out. WorldCat is a catalog of all the libraries all over the country, and in some cases the world. And you might see some titles in there at the libraries that you're interested in. And this is what is used for interlibrary loans when you're borrowing from another library. Now, another tip is Percy. Do you remember when we were in school and we all used Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature, those big green books that were on the shelf? Well, Percy is a guide to genealogical magazines, and I have found articles about family members in using that catalog. So there may be some articles in a local genealogy society, a magazine that may be in the library. So that's something that you want to explore. The Allen County Library, we talked about that a few months ago. The Allen County Library is the 2nd largest genealogy library in the country. And they have all of these genealogy magazines. And in some cases, the little town may have it, but it may be save some time just asking Allen County to copy it for you and send it to you. I've had really good luck with them in terms of articles, even relating to my family. This is the WorldCat website. It's worldcat.org. It's a catalog to all libraries throughout the country, or most libraries. And what you can do is put in your city. Buxton is the town where in North Dakota where the family came, and they will show you the books that are available and the libraries where they're available. So that's a good place to start to see the public libraries in the areas that you're visiting. And here's Percy. These were articles I found through the Allen County Library. I found Red River Valley, which is where Buxton is, Stockholm, which is a town in this area. Definitely, Swedes definitely were in this Wisconsin, North Dakota area coming in the 1870s and 80s. Stockholm is a town, an actual town in Wisconsin. Swedish settlements in Dakota Territory. That's exactly what I was researching. Here's a particular person who is living in North Dakota. It's her diary. And then foreign immigration into North Dakota. So I found some great things in Percy. So that's something, as you start to do your research, you might want to explore that possibility. Then the next best thing is to call and write, maybe the best thing, to contact the librarian. So I went into worldcat.org and I saw that there was some Grand Forks library close by. And I thought, I'm going to write the librarian. I'm going to find out if there's some places I should go and visit. And she said that there were. I won't read this to you, but she said that there was a special collection at the Chester Fritz Library. And then she told me about the Myrna Library and the Trail County Historical Society. She said, these are places you might want to go. So this lady, this librarian, was very nice. And I thought, I'm going to get back to her. She's really been helpful. So I looked up in the WorldCat, and I looked under Buxton to see what was there. And I saw that the Grand Forks Library had 2 books that looked really interesting. So I wrote her back. I said, Dear Diane, and this is what the Monterey Public Library does all the time for people in terms of people who are doing genealogy studies and other ways too. I said, I'm in California, and I'm wondering if you could just take a quick look at these 2 books, take them off the shelf for me, and see if my people are there, Anders Petter or Carl Sandgren or John Sandgren, and see if they're listed at all. That would be really great. So Diane did, and she got right back to me. And she found a whole page on these Buxton Centennial book, 1880 to 1890, was a book that was published 100 years later to honor the original settlers in the town. And they had all kinds of things. She scanned them all for me and then just emailed them to me. Stories of the town and what it was like in 1880 when they came. And then she found a mention of my great uncle, a neighbor, Mr. Sandgren. He is Johan's Frederica's brother, but he changed his name, which makes it, of course, confusing. Told of having gone on skis to Fargo for a badly needed sack of flour, which he carried home on his back. This was a 120-mile round trip, but his pioneer spirit was strong, and so was his back, and had to be done. Well, this may be a little hyperbole. I did have to look up the mileage from Fargo to Buxton. It was 60 miles. So very likely this might have happened. To even make that even more believable was, let's see here. Just a moment. Let me go back and into my, okay, there we go. Maybe some of you read this when you were younger or read this to your kids, but historical novels really can give you insights into a lifestyle, because if it's a good writer, they've really done their research. Well, Laura Ingalls Wilder wrote this book called The Long Winter, which is in a town very close to Buxton, and it takes place in 1880. Well, after I saw that mention of my great uncle making this trip, 120 miles, and going back and looking at this long winter, I remembered this book. I saw that 1880 was a pretty rough winter. In fact, trains stopped. They were not running. They were not bringing in food. People were actually, as in the long winter, boiling bark to survive and doing the best they could. And so that was not a surprise that he maybe did make that walk 120 miles to get food for his family. So this is just another reminder, historical novels might give you some insights too. Okay, so that's libraries. Let's move on to churches. Definitely call the church. Ask about the records. Ask the members of the church who may have surnames you're researching. Ask about the local cemetery and attend a service. So we did all that. We went to a service and they were so great. People came up to us. We were introduced in the service. And afterwards, people came up to us and said, oh, I knew such and such. I knew such and such. And that was some of the old timers really did remember some of the family members that stayed on in North Dakota. This lovely lady is showing us some of the archives in the church, and we were looking for names for baptisms and weddings. And then she had some pictures of the church. This is Finnerusia, where Anders Petter and Fredrika were married, baptized, where Fredrika's parents were married. And we, with the help of the genealogist, made contact with the sexton, who opened the doors for us and let us go inside. This is a church in Kingsburg. Now, our great-grandparents moved to Kingsburg after they left North Dakota after 10 years. And this is a church where they worshiped. Again, this is a church that's closed and you need to make arrangements for. A cousin who lives in Kingsburg was able to show us the church. And this is where the funeral for Anders Petter was held, in the Covenant Church in Kingsburg, which is a Swedish community down near Fresno. Okay, cemeteries. There is a site called Find a Grave and Billions of Graves. These are a collaborative database where people go in and take pictures of the tombstones, and you can search for names and find out where people are buried. And the great thing about Find a Grave is that it also mentions related people who are also in the cemetery. So you can find the cemetery where your people are. You can go and visit the cemetery, and then you can see all the collateral people that are all around. Billions of Graves is not as large a database, but it works in a similar way. So that is a place to explore before you take off on your trip. Call the cemetery, confirm the graves are located there. Confirm the hours and the days they're open. Sometimes there's a gate closed and you aren't even able to go in. Request a map, essential. And ask about information on the cards that are kept on each grave. I learned that many cemeteries have little index cards on each tombstone, and they have information about the people who purchased the tombstone. So those would probably be, relatives, maybe an obituary, other information about the person, and they will share that with you. They will copy it for you if you go into the office. So ask if there is information on your ancestors as you visit the cemetery. So here we were in the Swedish cemetery in Finnerusia. Sweden has, you have to maintain the cemetery. And if no one's around to maintain it, then they will bury someone else on top of that family member. I think this is the case in a lot of European countries. They just don't have the land to give a plot for each person. So families are out there caring for the graves. And actually, there's little, all the utensils, all the things you need, a watering can, a rake, etc., are right there for you to use. So it was really fun to see family members clipping and planting and whatever. But these particular people that we were looking for were the 1960s, so they still were in that area. This was in Buxton, which was a 2-year-old family member who had a beautiful marble tomb. The problem with marble is, it's starting to wear and it's hard to read sometimes. And this is, 150-year-old tombstone. Again, I wished I'd had some clippers. I wish, just because I wanted to make that nice for Amanda. This is in Australia. We went to this was a very neglected cemetery, and it would have been very hard to find without being there with a cousin. So think about the kind of cemetery you're going to. You might want to have proper shoes and a hat, and this was a harder one to visit, but we did find what we were looking for. Okay, this is why a map's so important. We arrived at the Hillside Cemetery in Minneapolis. This is the Nystrom part of my family. This is the other Swedish side of the family. And you see, we were looking for the brothers of Jacob Victor, my other great-grandfather, Reuben and his wife Myrtle, William, and Augusta. You can see the red dots up at the top there. We arrive, the cemetery is closed. we can go into the cemetery, but the office is closed. There was no way we would have found this if we hadn't had a map. So I was so grateful that they had sent this and located with, it was still hard to find even with this map, but at least we spread out and we were with some new cousins and we found them. So I definitely recommend you contact the cemetery before. Okay, land, get a deed, get the documents, locate the coordinates, convert the coordinates to latitude and longitude. I'm going to go through this a little slowly, but this is sort of the way you would do it if you want to find where the land is. Plot the latitude and longitude or the GPS on Google Earth or Google Maps. Remember, we're looking for farmland, so we didn't have an address. Check out the pictures of the land or the house and its location on Google Maps or Google Earth. Okay, so let's take this a little slower. This is the deed to the 160 acres that Anders Petter acquired through the Homestead Act. And you can see up there, it is the northwest quarter of the section number 2, township 147, range 51. Okay, so that's critical. Here's the more about this. This is interesting. Again, cluster research. Carl Johansson is Fredrika's brother. So that was new to me. Oh, I didn't know that they traveled together. And when I started to look up immigration records, I could see they all traveled together. They traveled with Anders Petter's brother-in-law, the brother of his wife. But he acted as a witness when Anders Petter acquired his land. Okay, so now we've got our plat map. And this plat map I got at one of the historical societies, which was just great. Okay, so let's stick with me on this. Okay, so it's a part of, he's going back here. It's section 2. Section 2, I know you can't see it, but up there with a circle, here's a 2. So this is the section right here, section 2. It's the northwest quarter, which is right here. This is Anders Petter's land. And it's in the township 147 up here. And then the range over here is 51. So that's how you read a plat map. Now, over here are the Sandbergs, which were mentioned in that Enoch Larson obituary. These were their neighbors. So I took all of this. There's a website called Legal Land Description Converter. And you take these public land survey numbers and you plug them in. Here's northwest quarter, section 2, township, and north, and the state, Trail County. You plug in everything you can. And this is all, this is a site on the internet. Lo and behold, they give you the coordinates, geocodes up there, and you can go right to Google and find out where it is. Isn't this amazing? Here's his plot right here. Okay, so then I clicked on Google. There it is. And then I did a Google map search, how we're going to get out there, etc. And here is his 160 acres right here. Here's the road we came around down by the 160 acres. We got kind of lost because it was all just fallow land, not really being planted, and there weren't really any houses. And we really couldn't figure out which were the sections which we got there. But this article with all of the people mentioned, the fan club, Enoch Larson, and the Soderbergs, which I had seen on that plat map. We saw a house across the road, and in front of the house was Soderberg Farms. And the sign, although it isn't clear to read, it says, been in the family for over 100 years. And we go, oh, because if you go back here, you see, way back, here's where the Soderbergs are, right here. So this is Anders Petter, and this is his brother-in-law, Carl Sandgren, Johansson Sandgren. So that was a real coup. We were really pleased with ourselves on that one. And so then we were able to stand on the land and know that that was land. My husband was concerned about the drainage of the land. I don't know how great that land was, but they were there 10 years and they were able to sell it and take that land and invest again in Kingsburg. And this is a family who was a tenant farmer. So he had 160 acres. This is another one. This is my Revolutionary people. This up here, this is a map of drawn a long time ago. Thomas Willis is the person up here. And I went into the Historical Society and I said, you know, how I got this map, and he actually had this big map on the wall. I said, how do I get up there? The roads are all different. He told us how. We went up there. We were trying to figure out where this land would have been outside of Westfield, New Jersey. This is the area. And I knew we had a sawmill because I had done my research on that. And I saw Sawmill Road, which when we got to the part on the road, and sure enough, this is probably the area. And this is probably what it looked like. It's a residential area now, but there are very big lots. Probably it was very much like this, the acreage that he owned in Westfield, New Jersey. These are the Loyalists. Now the Loyalists are another story. This is a cousin I met online. She's a school teacher, and she dresses up as Catherine Monroe during the Revolution. And she's a Canadian, she lives in Toronto, and she goes to the schools and tells the story of Catherine. Well, Catherine's husband, John Monroe, was hung in his yard by patriots. And she and her 6 children, she was 32 years old. She fled to Lake Champlain with her children, left their land, had to get out of there, and waited on the shore in a refugee camp until a ship came over to take the Loyalists over into Canada. And then she and her 6 children made their way to Mallorytown. So as we were exploring the Loyalists in the Canadian area, this was supplied by this cousin. She gave me this map. She said, this is the land that they had. So we came in on this highway, 401. And then when we saw the Mallorytown sign, we crossed over to 2, which was a much smaller road. We knew that we were in the right area when we saw how close we were to 401. We also saw Jones Creek here. This was all, Braille. I mean, we really weren't exactly sure. We came along and we figured that it was before another creek, before this creek over here. We figured it was right around in here where we saw it. So this was the land. It was in corn at this time. It was October. It was just beautiful. And her family got 160 acres and settled in Mallorytown. This barn is probably a 19th century barn. It's not an original building, but we got an idea of the beauty of the land. It was October, so the leaves were turning. This is Hollister. This is a meets and bounds. This is a little harder because you go to the west side of the San Benito River and then you look for the cottonwood tree. This is John Willis Green on my mother's side, who bought land a few miles south of Hollister. And I need to get over to the San Benito Historical Society because I'm sure they can help me find this plot. It's part of the San Justo Rancho out that way. And this picture is from one of those mug books, those local history books, because he had something written up about him. This is a man who made money in the gold rush that I talked about. I don't know if it was last month or the month before. So he had some money to buy land when he came to California. Okay, don't forget the historical and genealogy societies, because remember, they've got the photographs, the maps, the city directories, the telephone directories, school yearbooks, letters, newspapers. Older members may even know your family members. And they've got periodicals and newsletters. So definitely check those out. But remember, they're staffed by volunteers, and definitely check on those hours. They're subject to change. Call and make an appointment. And if you want to keep in touch with them, make the donation and join the organization, because they'll have newsletters that will come out. And I've done that with a couple, and they've been really interesting things that actually relate to what I'm researching. Also, you want to actually visit historical societies that are villages. This is Bonanzaville, and this is in North Dakota, right on the border of Wisconsin. And they've created, just like the upper Canadian Village, a little village of 1880s, what it was like in North Dakota. This is a historical society in Australia where my husband's family lived, and they had a room that was part of my husband's family. So, and they opened that for us specially because we said we were from America and we were part of that family. So calling is really important. Don't let this happen to you. This is a Laura Ingalls Wilder train depot that her family used, and it was closed. I didn't check on that one. Okay, the cousins. Again, we've got our collateral cousins we want to make sure we connect with. And these are some of the cousins we've met through the internet and through DNA. All wonderful. And more cousins that have had information. These are the collateral cousins that have the information that can add to our story, add color to our own story. Crowdsourcing is the idea of asking people for information. That would be online. Practice of obtaining information and asking people questions. And when I was putting a book together on Finnerosia, I saw this lady had written a lot about Swedish immigration. So I wrote her and I said, I asked her about how would this family in Finnerosia, this little town, get to Gothenburg? How would they make it over there? Did they get in a cart? Was there a railroad? She wrote right back and she said, there was a railroad. In 1862, a railroad was built. So they would have gotten on the railroad, gone to Gothenburg, then caught the ship to Hull, crossed Great Britain and left from Liverpool to New York. So, write these people. She's actually a docent at the Immigrant Museum in Gothenburg. So that was a good contact to make. Facebook will have things about different societies. I was writing the Trail County Historical Society, the one the library recommended I contact, and they got back to me with things. I gave them a little bit about my family and they came back with some interesting things. Facebook has Swedish American Genealogy Group. This group will translate for you. So if you have documents that are of another language, you see if there's a Facebook group for your ancestors. Some things are just serendipity. Even though you do all the planning in the world, some things just happen. This was in Westfield, New Jersey. It was an historical society. They had a house that they had fixed up, and we thought, oh, we'll stop and see it. Walk in the front door, and to the right on the wall is an enormous family tree. And it is my 5th great grandmother's house. She was raised in this house. And there was her name, Sabra Miller. I couldn't believe it. Her dates, everything. It was her house, her childhood home. I could see the bedroom where probably the 6 kids slept, 4 kids in a bed or whatever. That was total serendipity. In Buxton, I called the church. They gave me the plat map. And the plat map gave me the name of the person who currently owned the land of my great uncle, Carl Sandgren. So I located him on Facebook and I sent him a message on Facebook and he responded. I said, I'm here with my brother and my sister-in-law and my husband, and we just wondered if we could just walk the land and he says, absolutely. He said, I've got things to show you. Come on over. So we went over. That was lucky. On his land is the foundation of the house of my great-grandfather, or great-uncle, the brother of Frederica. And the reason why we know that's probably the case is that, number one, there was a root cellar and there were steps into it. Unfortunately, they're using it as a junkyard, but in any case, we got to see it. But the day before, we had taken a hike in a naturalist hike in which they were attempting to bring back the natural prairie. And this naturalist took us on this hike. And he said, you can always tell an early settler if there's a lilac tree planted by the front door. And by the front, looked like the front, was a lilac tree. Now, this is total serendipity. This was probably Carl Sandgren's home. And that was pretty neat to see that. This is the Nystroms. This is Jacob Victor Nystrom and his wife, whom he met in Connecticut. But he was raised in Dalstorp. And his father worked in a foundry in Dalstorp. And this is the kind of stone houses they lived in. He learned to be an iron maker, a foundry man, and he took those skills and brought them to America. But we got to see where he was raised and where his parents and his family was raised. And we picked up some of the ironworks that is there. And that was a cousin showed us that place. And that was really way out of the way. So I had a sense of where he came from. He then moved to Higganum, Connecticut, and he worked for the Scoville Hoe Company. He used his experience as working in a foundry to create hoes. And here they are, the long-handled hoes, which we understand they sold to plantations, that they were used by the enslaved as who worked in the fields. But this is where he worked, in Higganum, and he brought his experience from Sweden to Connecticut. And this is where he met his wife, Hulda. This was the factory where he worked. And by chance, we were able to find the factory. It's now being used as for photographic equipment. And also the transportation, this is in Connecticut. Connecticut Transportation has an office in there. But we knocked on the door, and the photographic people were nice enough to let us go in and look around and show us some of the things that were left over from the foundry when it was made hose. This is another serendipity. The Swedish people that the Genealogy Company group connected us with had letters from our family in Kingsburg that they had sent to them in Sweden. And this is a house where they lived, a little house. They had about 20 letters, and they didn't know who these people were. I knew who these people were because as a child, these were the great uncles and aunts that sat around at the reunions speaking Swedish. This was a receipt that money had been sent from Kingsburg to them. This is again the older sisters of Frederica. So that was total serendipity. This is a house in Kingsburg. The first cousins would correspond with each other. This is Kingsburg and this is Sweden. And those were the letters that would go back and forth between these two houses. To meet people through a genealogy society who tracked them down for us, and for them to have letters that my family in California had written was amazing, just a gift. These are the people writing the letters. This is Minnie, this is a great Aunt Minnie, and this is Uncle Oscar, great Uncle Oscar. These are the two that were children in Sweden that came to North Dakota and then Kingsburg. And these are some of the letters. I just want to share with you. I think you get a kick out of this. My brothers and my sister Emma send their regards. She will get married this summer. This is Emma, our Aunt Emma. My brother Oscar cooks for himself. He has no woman yet. If you know of any kind Christian girl, 25 years old, that would like to travel to America and have a home of her own, then he will send a ticket to her. Now we will send you some money, and that will be a Christmas gift. That was 1902, right before Emma and Dave, aunt and uncle, were married. I have this. So this is from Oscar. He talks about the vineyard and the leaves and the vineyards blooming. He talks about the grapes, the plums, the apricots, the nectars, the peaches. And he says, if you decide to make it over here soon, we've got plenty of work for you, for both old and young. When the harvesting of the fruit begins, they hire girls to cut the fruit to be dried. It is easy work, and they pay 5 cents per box. Some girls cut between 20 and 40 boxes a day. This went over. He was hoping that his cousins would come to America. And this is a photograph of my grandmother and grandfather right here, these two cutting cots. This is another aunt cutting cots, and then further over is her husband. So cutting apricots or cots was a common thing. And now again, Oscar's writing, he's looking for a wife. And he says he has a nice organ that cost $135 and 120 pieces of fine glass and china. He says that a married woman can take care of the house and cook for her husband. She doesn't have to work on the farm like they do in Sweden. He says 4 to 5 years from now, my land will be profitable. And now there are many things going on. We've gotten a telephone even. And when I show this letter to a cousin in Kingsburg who works in the Historical Society down there as volunteers, he was really excited about this because they really didn't know when telephones came into Kingsburg. This is 1905. So by then they did have telephones. So that was quite historical. Okay, so that was just a thrill. That was just definitely serendipity. Okay, so now we're getting ready to go. We want our binder, our itinerary, our smartphone, our camera. PhotoMime is an app to take great pictures of pictures. Look at it, explore it. It's an app on your smartphone, and it's almost like scanning. So check that out. Have business cards. I find that if I'm in a library, I leave my business cards, and if they find something later, they'll get in touch with me. Bring a flash drive because you might want to exchange something with your cousins. As I mentioned, I brought the family tree so that when we were in the cemeteries, I could see who these people were, and I was sharing that with my brother. I also brought my smartphone to record interviews with people. I wished I had brought, in some cases, except I don't want to pack my bag with all these things, but you know, a water bottle will help you read the tombstones better. A sponge, you don't want anything that would scrape it. But this is just a way of being able to read tombstones. If you're in one of those difficult cemeteries, you might want bug repellent. We were in a cemetery in Connecticut, New Jersey, in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and there were ticks. Boy, I was really on the alert for that one. So just if you're going to be in a wilderness type cemetery, be prepared. And maybe you might want to have a journal. I find it really helpful to write down what I've seen each day because just so much is happening. This is my husband's uncle in Australia. He's going to be 100 this year. And we interviewed him. Pretty special because he is going to be 100. And he said, enjoy yourself. Life is short. Do what you want to do and enjoy it. Don't put it off. If you want to travel, then travel. If you want to do something else, take it up and do it. And that was Uncle Dick's advice. But our interview with him was very special. So when you get home, label your pictures. These are all the things that I tell myself I should do. Transcribe your interviews, file or scan your important papers, add your discoveries to your genealogy software, write up the story of your ancestors, maybe even do a book. You know, this is a book I put together with a software, another book that I did about the North Dakota trip. And don't forget, you know, you might want to send a donation to those who have helped you, and be sure and send your cousins the photos that you said you were going to, and stay in touch with those new cousins, because guess what? They find new things. When we were back home, Evie, who was one of the Swedish cousins, said we had a flood in our storage area, and guess what I found? I found the family Bible. And she sent me all the pictures of the family Bible, which was amazing. Again, this is a family that the Genealogy Society found. And in the Bible were these pictures. And she wrote, who are these people? They were stuck in the Bible. So I sent this out to one of the cousins that I thought would know this. This is Carl Sandgren and his wife and his daughter, Elma. And this is Elma's first husband who died. So we were able to identify who they were. And now the Swedish cousins know who they are and where they are and this is all about sharing and collaborating with those collateral cousins. Okay, so as we tie things up, hitting the road, I wish you safe travels. I wish you a lot of fun. And I hope that you enjoy all of your discoveries and your surprises. And it really is about being prepared. A lot of it's spontaneous. I don't want to take away from that because the serendipity things are amazing. But if you prepare, you're bound to have an amazing adventure. So I wish you much adventure. I want to invite you. We're going to take a break from All Things Relative for a while, and I wanted to invite you in the meantime to a monthly group that meets online. We are connected to the Monterey County Genealogical Society. We call ourselves Off the Charts. We're the storytellers, and we share the stories of our various ancestors. We'll be meeting next Wednesday at 1:30, and our topic is Our Family History is World History, and we're going to share 20th century stories of ancestors. So if this is something that interests you and you are really getting into genealogy, email me and I will send you a link. We have a lovely group of people who are great storytellers. We always are entertained. And again, there's my email. And if you have any questions, want to stay in touch, please email me. I love hearing from you. It's really been a pleasure to speak to you all. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and see if there are any questions and comments. Okay. ahead, turn it back to you, Sean.
Well, thank you very much, Kathy, for all that information. Very fascinating, and now I want to hit the road. Right now, I'd like to open up the floor to anyone who has any questions for Kathy. Please feel free to unmute yourself, or you can type them in the chat, and I'd be happy to read them out loud for you.
Do any of you have some trips coming up? Oh, Jennifer does. Jennifer, where are you going?
Monday, we leave for Wyoming and then head to Northeast Iowa, New Hampton, where my husband's father was the youngest of 3 sons. And we're going to see his cousin there. But especially, we're going to the county courthouse to see if they have the records of the Commission on Insanity, because my husband's grandmother was committed 3 times to the hospital 60 miles away, Independence, Iowa. And we did get the hospital records direct from the hospital a year ago, but I'm very interested in the legal records.
Great. Oh, I wish you the best on that. I didn't talk too much about courthouses. So those of you that were with me when we talked about every home has a story, if you're interested in just how to tackle courthouses, you might look at that on the YouTube channel, the Monterey Public YouTube channel. It's Every Home Has a Story. And so I'll be very interested to hear what you find, Jennifer. Good luck. That's great. And you want to get your hours right too, because courthouses are having unusual hours these days because of COVID. Yeah. Anybody else? Oh, Karen, do you have something planned? Karen.
Okay, you talked about the Hathy Trust digital library.
Yes.
Does it have a website or anything?
Yes, it does. So look that up and you can actually do a search by title of books that are on it. So there are so many things that are digitized. Save yourself time by doing that when you're at home. The other thing is interlibrary loans. The Monterey County Library and the Carmel Library both offer interlibrary loans, and you can go in and for a few dollars have them search for a book that you might be interested in at another library, which will come from Philadelphia or Louisiana or wherever. And that's a wonderful service that I have used. So remember interlibrary loans, and that's something you can locate these books through the world.
Okay, thank you.
.org. Yeah. Any other trips being planned? Marilyn. Hi, Marilyn.
Hi, Kathy. As you know, we're planning a trip to Scotland this in the fall, and
yes.
We haven't really started doing any research, so we should be doing that. How do we access the recording of your talk today, or any of the other talks you've done?
Sean, maybe you can answer that.
Yes, so all of this talk and all of Kathy's previous talks are hosted on the Monterey Public Library's YouTube page. If you go to the YouTube page, there's a special list called Genealogy, and that's where all of Kathy's talks are posted.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Marilyn.
Kathy?
Yes.
Yes, Karen?
I'm wondering if that lady's going to Scotland. I got this through Barnes and Noble, I believe, or maybe it was Amazon. But when we were traveling to Sweden, this map by Marco Polo was wonderful because it has all the small areas in the country. Great. It's a huge map, and we kind of cut it up in pieces so that we knew where we were going, and we mapped our route on it. Just a tip.
They have that for Scotland as well, I guess, huh?
I honestly don't know. They even have a website. It's www.marco-polo.com.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Maryland, they do have Scotland, and they do have a phone app that you can use.
Okay, great.
Good news.
So I have a few cousins on because I knew that they would be interested in the Swedish part of my talk. And did you guys learn anything today from about your great grandfather?
Very definitely. We didn't do enough research before we went.
Yeah.
I've never been, so I always learn something.
So you need to put that on your to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and thanks for the regulars that have tuned in. It's been wonderful to see you all. And I hope to see, I'll see many of you at Off the Charts, and any of that might like to join us, please let me know. So thanks, guys. Have fun, Jennifer, on your trip.